It's your panel, dude.
Oh, it's Danny's panel.
Okay, good, the Houdini. Okay, let me introduce some amazing guys right here who we have met before, and we have, oh boy.
Rabbi Cary Friedman.
Rabbi Cary Friedman, and Sholly Fisch, and Cary Kaplan, and Danny Fingeroth, and we also have the Gorf man himself, straight from the Nachum Siegel Network. And I'm going to turn this over to the pros. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Let's have a hand for Fred and Hi, everybody. So maybe we should talk a little bit more about who we are and how we came to be, so to speak. I'm Danny Fingeroth. I was a writer and editor of Marvel Comics for many years. I worked on Spider-Man, that's probably the best known, Dark Horse Dazzler, Deadly Foes, anything with a D, they kind of put me on. In recent years, I teach comics, I write about comics. So one of my books, Disguised as Clark Kent, Jews' Concentration of the Superheroes, on sale back there. And there should be somebody there who'd be happy to take it. Yes, a mere $30, and it's yours worth at least $30. So that's me, and I travel with the Wizard World convention chain, doing events like this all over the country. And I didn't have it set up, but my oddball Jewish project is I've written and trying to find a publisher for a graphic novel, The Life of Jack Ruby, the guy who killed Harvey Oswald and changed the world as we know it. An artist named Rick Geary, you may know from National Lampoon and other high-profile projects, is drawing that with me. So if that sounds like something intriguing, interesting, come talk to me afterwards. And starting at the end, who are you, sir?
I'm Gorf, Jordan B. Gorfinkel. Gorf is frog backwards. Gorf, frog, Gorf. So now you won't forget me. I want to see everybody back there. Hello, everybody back there. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for coming to the inaugural Jewish ComicCon. This has been a dream of Fabrice Sapolsky's for a very long time. I want to give him a shout out because without his dreaming, this would not be.
We should give him a chef hand.
Yeah, we should give him a chef hand. Amen. I am the former editor of Batman comics. During the 1990s, I oversaw growing the franchise from 2 books a month to 2 books a week, including the Batman Spider-Man crossover with Danny Fingeroth down there. And my claims to fame are Batman No Man's Land, which crossed over all of the Bat titles for one consecutive calendar year, was the basis for The Dark Knight Rises. Birds of Prey, the longest running superhero franchise starring women, and soon to be a new feature film. Thank you very much. And on the Jewish side, I do JewishCartoon.com. And I don't want to take up too much time with me, so come visit me at the table upstairs. Go to JewishCartoon.com or Gorfy, Gorfy.com. You can learn more about me. Next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rabbi Cary Friedman. I am in my current incarnation, I'm a police trainer. I'm an associate director of the Center for Tactical Resilience and Ethical Policing. I'm a consultant to the FBI. What I do with all that stuff, why it's relevant to you, is that I find unusual ways in which to share Torah values. I distill them into universal kinds of concepts that are good for everyone to know, Jews, non-Jews, everybody. And I have been involved in various kinds of outreach over the years. In the course of that outreach, so that led me to produce this book, Wisdom from Batcave, which is a presentation of a number of values that are Batman values, and I think are Torah values. So it allows me to teach some Torah ideas in places that might not otherwise have access to those ideas.
Sholly.
Hi, I'm Sholly. So, let's see. I'm so glad I didn't have to follow George. So by day, I make educational TV shows and games and all kinds of stuff for kids. Late at night when my family's asleep, I write comic books. Started at Marvel, do stuff for DC, including a whole lot of Batman stuff. Batman Brave and the Bold. I did a Commissioner Gordon Two-Face story for Batman Chronicles, edited by Jordan B. Gorfinkel. Did a couple issues of Catwoman, all sorts of things, Batman.
I am Cary Kaplan.
I am a comic book writer and award-winning author and a screenwriter for television, video games, and transmedia. I've written for TV shows like True TV Presents World's Dumbest and Broke Bites on FYI Network and PBS Kids series Cyber Chase and Kids Next Door on Cartoon Network. And written a lot of different comic book stories, and they featured everyone from Speed Racer to Superman to Bart Simpson, written for DC and Dark Horse and Bongo Comics and IDW and many other places. And one of the main reasons I'm here is because I'm adorable. And another reason, feel free to disagree, it's a free country. And another reason is because I wrote a book called From Crack Out of Krypton, Jews and Comic Books, and I go all over the world spreading my message of love and Bruce Banner-like, you know, living like a fugitive. No, you know how he goes from city to city on the TV show, the Kenneth Johnson. I am always angry.
Ari, did you injure your finger in a supervillain battle?
I was bitten by this spider. It's very strange. You're not going to believe what happened. My life hasn't been the same since, but that's a secret.
Celine Dion.
Absolutely.
As Ari was saying, not only is he adorable, but we're all adorable, and we're good looking, and we're smart. However, I have a feeling you came here for Batman. I'm just guessing. Woo! Because I have found, again, in my travels and my many panels, I find if you put the word Batman in the title of a panel, I've done panels back to back with the exact same people, and the word Batman was in one panel title and not in the other, and I have 4 times as many people. So there's something about Batman that results in an SRO panel here. And since we're at the Jewish ComicCon, I mean, Batman was created by 2 Jewish Bronx boys, Bob Kane, Bill Finger, and Edward Hell from Jerry Robinson, who was a New Jersey Bronx boy, but we, you know, count him in. So something about that character. Why is the room filled with that? You know, filled with Batman? It started filling before, and what's Jewish about it? Anybody want to tackle that?
Sure, I'll be happy to start. Denny O'Neil, thank you. Denny O'Neil, the master or sensei of Batman, who himself is a Catholic boy, always said that the secret success to Batman is that he is endlessly adaptable. There is a Batman for every era. And even though, and sometimes they coincide. For example, in the 2000 decade, 2000-2010, you had the Christopher Nolan movies coinciding with a Batman Brave and the Bold interpretation of the character. One was Batman as a Boy Scout big brother, and the other one is Batman as the brooding Dark Knight, and they both work. So he is endlessly relatable as a result of that, and therefore tremendously popular. And Sholly, after you're nodding, I'm going to let you take over.
I think part of that, and I always do this, is this. I can't draw. What? And yet, what? You know who this is.
Did Jack Kirby draw that?
Yes, Jack.
Steve Bissett.
Jack Kirby after being dead for 20 years. So that's, I think somewhere is part of it. So,
Yeah, no, I think it's fine. And yes, Batman is one of the only characters I can draw too. But you'll notice that people don't hire me as an artist. No, so look, Bruce Wayne is about as non-Jewish as you can possibly get. You know, I mean, he's a rich wasp, and he's got a butler, and I mean, yeah. But if you look at the values that he embodies, depending on who he writes, and as long as he's not being written as a psychopath, you know, here's a guy who has experienced tragedy and has dedicated his life to making sure other people don't, right? You know, and so all of those core values of trying to better yourself and through that better the world, you know, because again, this is not a guy who was born with superpowers. This guy had to work really, really, really hard, right? Had to study for years, had to work out for years, all of that stuff. What does that sound like? You know, there's a lot of really core Jewish values that are inherent in all of us. You know, and occasionally, very occasionally, I've had the opportunity to make it more explicit, but we can talk about that later.
Well, I love the story in which you established that really Thomas and Martha Wayne wanted their son to be a doctor.
Right.
number of values that we could try to explain why they're uniquely Jewish values, because we were talking earlier, and a lot of different religious systems could lay claim to these values, and to some degree or other they're right. It's probably beyond the scope of this panel to explain why they're really uniquely, completely Jewish values. But just in a general sense, I think there are three that really define characters. Define the character. One is the notion of the infinite potential, so to speak, of the human being. The Torah celebrates the greatness of a human being. In the Batman stories, I mean, the guy can do everything. He just, you work, if you do enough push-ups, if you study chemistry, if you just keep going back to the well, the more he works, the more he can accomplish. And that kind of a very cheery disposition, that way of looking at a human being, I think is a very Jewish value. There are chazals, all kinds of statements in the Gemara, in the Talmud, in Jewish literature, about the infinite, right? The Tselem Elohim, the image of God in which every human being is created. There's no end. I could quote sections from the Talmud that describe the greatness of a human being that are just amazing. When do you ever see that played out in popular culture? Batman shows that. The comment you made about responding to adversity, boy, we are the experts at that. My mother's a Holocaust survivor. She should live and be well. She and the people like her, they staggered to this country, recreated lives. They used adversity as a springboard to accomplish greatness. They didn't succumb, they didn't give up. And that ability to look, and we've been doing it as Jews, we're the experts of that. We've been doing it for 3,300 years, 3,700 years actually, from Abraham and Sarah. And we just, the more the world throws at us, what we do is we turn it into extraordinary accomplishment. And then everybody benefits from that. And then I think the third value, which is uniquely Jewish and which is really which is the hallmark of Batman, is that incredible need that we have, every human soul needs to live for something larger than our personal pleasure. To sit around and eat ice cream sandwiches and hang out by the pool and just everything's ease and comfort. We desperately need is to live for something that's larger, like some message, some meaning, some value which is higher than ourselves and our own personal comfort. And the Batman, those three values, there are many others, but those are the three core, they converge and Bruce Wayne's Batman.
Now, you guys talked a lot about, some of the Jewish values that Batman can be made to symbolize. But the creators of Batman, Bob Kane and Bill Finger, were both Jewish. Do you think that informed or influenced their creation of Batman in any way? I guess Jordan will go first, because as the editor of Batman.
Right, I can tell you that I did a panel at the LA ComicCon a year ago, and Denny O'Neil was my guest. And we asked him a similar question, and he knew all of those guys who were the creators. And he said that he never really heard them talking about their Judaism at all. And I have to believe that in their core, they were responding to something from their own background, but it wasn't overt. And that's about all I know.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, by analogy. So there was this documentary that I watched not long ago about Jewish comedians, which I forget what it's called, but it's a pretty good documentary. But the thing that was really interesting about it was that there was this generational thing going on. And when they were talking to like Mort Saul and all these old Jewish comedians, all of them said, oh, I don't consider myself a Jewish comedian. I happen to be Jewish and I'm a comedian, and that's it. You talk to the generation who were like 40 years younger than that, and they all said, well, yeah, of course I'm a Jewish comedian. And I think it's a reflection of the generational thing in society. In that era, back in 1939, Jews were not trying to stand out. They were trying to blend in and assimilate and be like everybody else. So I don't think that they were, explicitly trying to imbue Batman or Superman or Captain America or any of the other guys who were created by Jews with explicitly Jewish values. But this is what they came from, and this is who they were, and it was their culture, and it was part of what they knew, and so I think that stuff bled through in various ways, but not because they were trying.
Well, can you give us an example?
So, with Batman specifically, I mean, it's the stuff we've been talking about. It's those values. It's taking the tragedy and turning it into something, positive and improving the world. It's all of that stuff, but I don't think they set out.
I think the other things, say, if you were here earlier, we talked about Superman as, sort of a metaphor for the immigrant experience, the Jewish immigrant experience, and compared to Moses being sent down the river. Batman seems I think can be seen. Right, World War II is either has started or is about to start in Europe. Kristallnacht is somewhere in there, I think, in the subconscious, you know, as specific as things that might elicit a specific response in Jewish creators. And I think the other side of the immigrant experience, you know, Superman's all bright and sunny, he lands in Smallville, and, you know, is adopted by the Kents. Batman is kind of like the noir Warner Brothers movies. It's the terror of the city. It's the city as enemy, as urban jungle. And I mean, again, I think it's a general immigrant experience, a generational thing. But I think there's something about the rumblings of the world, you know, in Europe.
Rumblings.
The rumblings. Hopefully not the same rumblings. You know.
You timed that perfect.
You know, I paid them $5 for that. The rumblings of what was happening in Europe that you know, somehow I could see Batman as a dark response as opposed to Superman. Ta-da, I'm here, you know.
Well, we did a story like that. Paul Pope did a story in Batman Chronicles in which he portrayed Bruce Wayne as this bon vivant fop in Weimar, Germany, and that was his cover for being the superhero Batman that was trying to obviously combat the rise of Hitler and so forth. And there's no more stark example of trying to put the Jewish face on the character than probably that. And a funny anecdote behind that, Paul Pope is one of the most amazing creators that you will ever work with and whose artwork you will ever see. He's a force of nature. And when I was working on the story with him, I was terrified by just how powerful the story was and how on the nose, you'll forget that turn of phrase given the present company, the story was turning out to be, and I hid it. And I got it into print before I ever showed it to Paul Levitz, who was the president of DC Comics at the time. And I was afraid that he would kill the story, and I really wanted to see it published, and I was terrified of what he would think. And sure enough, when the story made it into print, and he looked at his pile of comics, he came down to me in the office, and he was hopping mad. He was furious. And he said, "What right do you have to not show me the story ahead of publishing? Had I known about it, I would have publicized it." True story.
And then there's also the Elseworld story, Batman Holy Terror.
Yeah.
Which it does have a Jewish character, and it's sort of like a minor little side note, but you know, the character of Dr. Erdl, who's the character that in the regular DC universe discovers Martian Manhunter when he first comes to Earth. But here, he is someone, the idea is that there's no separation between church and state, and the church has taken over America, isn't it?
Your memory's better than mine.
Okay.
I'm afraid.
It's basically the alternate Earth where the Catholic Church has completely taken over, the Catholic Church or the Christian Church has completely taken over every facet of American life, and Jews are discriminated against, and they're hunted down. And so one of the ways that one of them makes a deal in which he can actually live openly is that he's Dr. Erdl, and he experiments on the various superheroes who he's encountered. He experiments on the Flash, he experiments on Superman, tries to kind of tortures them. And it's brought out, Bruce Wayne discovers all this, because as Batman, he's trying to fight against this sort of fascist version of America. And he's like, "But you're Jewish, your name is Erdl, you know, why are you doing all this?" And, you know, he sees it as the ends justify the means. So it's,
So now I'll talk about the most explicitly Jewish comic book story I ever wrote. So when I was doing Batman Brave and Bold, you know, knowing that the December issue was coming up, I've written some Christmas stories in my time because why not? But I decided I wanted to do a Hanukkah story. And it was also, and so, you know, I thought, okay, so I need to team him up with a Jewish hero, and so I picked Ragman, because why not? And it was also around the time that the whole Occupy movement was going on. So all this stuff about, you know, poverty and all that was out in the public eye and all of that, and so I said, all right, so this is good. So what I'll do a story, because here's Ragman, who works in the, like, poorest, worst slums of the city, And Ragman is feeling really beaten down because no matter what he does, everybody, life around him is miserable, and he can't change that. And so he's kind of lost his way a little bit. And this local rabbi basically brings him around with the story of Hanukkah, because what he does is he tells him the story of Hanukkah, the temple, the menorah, 1 jar of oil, last 8 days, all that. And, and Ragman, and he says it's, miracles, just like all these people around here who are helping out because bad guys are trying to destroy the shul because they want to take over the neighborhood and whatever. And he said, just like you. And Ragman says, well, me? No, you're thinking about real superheroes like Superman, and the rabbi says, no, you're missing the point of the Hanukkah story. Because God could have made that oil burn forever. God could have helped them find 100 jars of oil, but he gave them just enough. And why? To teach us that nobody gets everything they want, but God gives us what we need. And Ragman comes around, and he actually goes back to his shop and lights his menorah, and everything is good. And Batman can accommodate that kind of story. He can accommodate the kinds of stories that these guys have been talking about. And at the same time, he can be Dark Knight, and he can be Adam West, and he can be whatever. Because he's just infinitely flexible at that point.
Who created Ragman? Anybody know?
Joe Kubert and Bob Kanigher, I think.
Fascinating. So
But-
that was
but
his
he was
response
not- but-
to the. Go ahead.
No, but originally Ragman was Rory Reagan. I mean, he was Irish, but I think Keith Giffen changed him to a Jew.
Well, it's weird. I interviewed Joe Kubert from Crack Out of Krypton, and he told me that he always had it in mind that he was supposed to be Jewish. Yeah, which I found.
Rory Reagan?
Well, look at his superpower. He's
It
schmucked
could
that
be-
man.
Well, Reagan could be, a shortened version.
Yanovich.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Very possible. Jack Kirby is often an Irish name, but he's really Kurtzman. Okay. Jordan, as group editor of Batman, you're the custodian of the character for a number of years. And what did this responsibility mean to you? Did it ever weigh heavily on you in any way?
Yes.
Thank you. Next question. Yeah. Elaborate.
And with great responsibility, there comes great power.
Right. Thankfully, I worked on one Spider-Man comic, so I'm able to quote that line. Right.
You can quote it anyway.
Right. The line we often quoted was anybody that would come in that we would worry about. We would, let's say, Rob Cary walked into the room. We'd say Rob Cary is a cowardly and superstitious lot. It was a great line.
Which is true, by the way. I don't know these people, but they somehow have read me on here.
Criminals are a cowardly and superstitious lot is one of the famous lines of the Batman origin story, and that was endlessly quotable. So maybe those who understand. What was the question again?
It's just
The responsibility for Batman. Yes, as Danny, I'll quote Danny a lot, but Danny always says our job is to make the funny books. And in the end, it's a business, and a business has to earn a profit, and we're doing popular entertainment. But as we touched on in the first panel this morning, I felt very profoundly that we needed to have some foundation of morality or ethics to the stories. It's built into Batman's DNA that he doesn't use a gun, that he doesn't murder, because that would be repeating the sins that created the situation that he himself is in. And Batman is dedicated to making sure that nobody else suffers the same pain that he felt when he lost his parents. So why in the world would he pick up a gun? That's what did him in. So instead he perfects himself and he uses martial arts and science and detective work and so forth. And I definitely felt, not the pressure, but the responsibility, the deep responsibility to be the custodian of this character, to keep all of the traditions alive, but at the same time, of course, evolve the character. Now, I worked on Batman in the 1990s, and that is, I would say, you guys can chime in also, a much maligned period.
It's being rediscovered.
It's being rediscovered. Kind of like
They're rediscovering they can make money. Collecting and selling the comics
exactly.
in the 1990s.
It's a business. That's exactly right. Right. Us and that Janet Jackson song. We're being rediscovered at the same time. It's a little political reference for you folks out there. Or was that in the 80s? I don't know. Anyway, I'll stick to comics. So the challenge was, how do you keep the tradition at a time of great upheaval in the comic book industry? Because in the early 90s, we had these outsized sales. I mean, I started on Nightfall, And I went through Night's End and Cataclysm and everything in between, and ended, or I should say retired amicably, after No Man's Land. In the beginning, we were using stat and repeats and photostatting and chemical-based publishing, and at the end, we were fully digital. And you can see the progression of comics on a technical side, because comics is art after all, throughout that decade, and we were reinventing the medium as we were going along. So on the one hand, yes, I felt the weight and the responsibility. On the other hand, every day was, we got to get the books out, and we got to make them as great as we can. We've got to find new ways of reinventing this medium while still telling a great story. So I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. I sent in the manuscript. The book came from a number of classes I used to take when I was doing outreach work. Yeah, this is shameless. They're available in the back for sale. Got 100,000 copies in my
Right,
garage.
everybody who asks, want to hold it up. Nice.
A bunch of anti-Semites.
Eat a bunch of soup.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, so I was giving a bunch of lectures. I was Rabbi at Duke University, and I was, in order to get the kids interested, I would use the Batman as a springboard, etc. So I put this together, and I sent it in to DC Comics. I mailed it in. We had just moved to New Jersey, and I mailed it in, and the next day I sent it overnight. The next day, Denny O'Neil called me up, which I thought it was my friend John Mishkin, who was pretending to be him calling me. So we had a very, very unpleasant few minutes in the original part of the conversation. I said, John, cut it out, you stupid head. Right? And he was like, this is Dennis O'Neil calling. Like, it just, by the time I finally realized. So, yeah.
Actually, forgive me, it would have sounded like this. This is Denny O'Neil. Okay.
That's how it sounded. So, being superstitious and cowardly. So anyway, so he said to me, I said, how is this possible? So he said, well, the thing came in today's mail, and I get this huge bunch of stuff, and I slid all the envelopes, all this stuff, and I throw out all the garbage, and I just have this pile left. He said, when I saw there was a rabbi, an author about Batman, he said, I started reading it right away. And he said, I just couldn't stop. And he said, I'm an Irish Catholic. He said, and yet what you were saying, he said, I wouldn't have maybe quoted a story about Rabbi Zusha. And he said, maybe the Elder Hillel is not exactly the proof text I would write. He said, but what you said was everything that I tried to share in the world, in my professional career. He said, I went into comics. He said, I had an agenda. And he said, everybody who goes into entertainment, and the pop culture, they're creating all this stuff, whatever they're writing, he said they have an agenda. He said, my agenda, and he said, I thought about this early on in my life and my career. I wanted to target the youth. I wanted to get to them, and I wanted to share my values. And the values that he had were these. And I thought that was very interesting. And when I sent the book around, the book has in the front a bunch of blurbs from all kinds of creators in the industry. I was very gratified that I got a bunch of comments back from legends. I spoke with Jerry Robinson, and she rest in peace. He said to me, they would have liked this book, those two guys, the creators. He said, they used to talk in these kind of terms. They were trying to create a hero. And I got comments, positive comments from everybody. Steve Englehart, Chuck Dixon, like these big guys. And I felt great that they liked this version, and they shared the values. And that gave me a sense that I was kind of right. But I also had a sense that I was right when the guys whose Batman versions I hate, who created him, who portrayed him as being irreparably broken, and he was angry, and this was just some socially accepted way to vent his rage, and he was just irreparably broken, when they said, that's not Batman. No one can go through that kind of stuff in life and suffer that kind of trauma and everything and come out and be any kind of normal. And I said, well, I have a mother who is a super heroine who survived worse, and I have, our simulated family of Holocaust survivors. I've known people like that, and they said, no, it's not possible. So the fact that they didn't like this portrayal, these values, told me I was right. The fact that the good guys who write Batman told me I was right, and that Dennis O'Neil thought that was right, so that gave me a pretty good sense. But what the question originally had been like, was there a sense of responsibility in producing Batman? I think the guys who produce Batman understand that they have an obligation to share those values.
Sholly, you've written a number of Batman stories, and some set the continuity of the Brave and the Bold animated series from a few years ago, some set in the regular DCU, and so on. Do you have a favorite one?
Oh, no. See, that was easy. No, because there are aspects of all of them that I like. I love the classic original Batman. I love Denny's Detective Batman. I love Frank Miller's Dark Batman. I love Adam West's Goofy Batman. And, and thank God, you know, by dint of the kinds of stuff that I do, I've gotten to write a little bit of a bunch of them, which is kind of nice. But well, here, this is not a Batman story, it's a Superman story, but you know, you guys have read. So here's the difference between writing stuff that's in continuity and writing stuff for kids' books that's out of continuity. So kids' books.
Can you explain what continuity means?
Yes. So continuity is if it affects all the other comics and it has to be matching up and all of that. Right? So in the kids' books, I have been blessed with editors who, when I say things like, you know, I want to use Batmite as my you know, big, not villain, but guest star. That's the imp who plagued Batman, who was his greatest fan back in the 50s. And I've had editors who say, okay, why don't you throw in Mr. Mxyzptlk, like Superman's imp too? And that's great. Now, when I work, you know, I did backups for Grant Morrison's runs on Action Comics. Yeah. And I'm not Grant, but
You're great.
thank you. So, in one of those stories, we were starting off with, it was actually the story that Neil deGrasse Tyson helped write and helped us find a real life place for Krypton. There is an actual star that we have identified as Krypton star. But the first couple pages, we're going to have the Justice League. And so I said, all right, I'm going to try to make this as easy on myself as possible. I'm going to pick the most obscure Justice League villain I can possibly think of that nobody else could possibly be using, and then that way I'm not going to have a whole lot of editorial problems where they say, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, whatever. So I picked Zotar the Weapons Master. Zotar the Weapons Master appeared once in the second Justice League story, and I think may have shown up once or twice since then, but not more than that. And the note I got back was, oh, sorry, Jeff Johns has plans for Zotar the Weapons Master. And so I said, all right, well, if I can't even manage Zotar, then I'm just going to make it an alien invasion and make them generic aliens. And because one of my little pet peeves is I hate these alien names that are just like a bunch of consonants and apostrophes. So I made the leader of the alien invasion, I named him GBRSSSH, gibberish. And I got a note back saying, you know, from on high saying, you can't do that, you're not taking it seriously, whatever. So I said, fine. So I had to change the name of the alien leader. So I made it NRSSSHKT apostrophe T, Nourish K. And because none of the people on high were Jewish, it got into print. So that's the difference between working in continuity and out.
I'm sitting here sort of trying to, you know, come up with some Jewish Batman connection that nobody, you know, including me, has come up with. Because it's, you know, and the things that
He covers his head?
he covers his head. What?
Batwoman's Jewish.
But no, the things I came up with about the creators, because I really think that, you know, like Simon and Kirby, like Siegel and Schuster, these are guys from Jewish milieus, whether or not their particular families were religious or observant. In Bob Kane's ghost-written autobiography called Batman and Me, written with or maybe by Tom Andre, but based on, you know, anecdotes told him by Bob Kane, he tells a story of them doing having to work over Christmas weekend on a deadline for a comic. But the way the story is described, it's about his father bringing him roast chicken and matzo ball soup. It's the most Jewish Christmas story. And you have to read between the lines, but it's quite clear that his father is bringing him Shabbos dinner. And I mean, you didn't have to know that to tell the story. But and Tom Andre is not Jewish, the ghost, you know, the co-writer / ghostwriter. So there's something important to King. And then the other thing, you know, I got, you know, through, you know, writing that book and just being interested in history year, I got to know Jerry Robinson, who co-created the Joker and Robin, and worked with Kane and Finger. And Jerry spent the last 10 or 20 years of his life putting together exhibits and articles and really pointing out the Jewish element of comics in general. It wasn't just an exhibit of, oh, here's the history of comics, it's here's the Jewish history of comics to be shown in Jewish museums. So there's, somehow I feel like that must have gotten into the Batman comics. As Cary said, maybe just the idea of leading an ethical life and training the great Democratic thing about being Spider-Man is you don't have to study a lot and you don't have to work out. You just have to get bitten by a radioactive spider. So that's one fantasy. But the Batman fantasy of perfecting yourself to be the best you can possibly be is certainly arguably a Jewish angle and stuff.
Well, what do you guys think? No, seriously, I heard a couple people shouting out ideas over there. Danny poses a very good question, which is there an aspect of Batman's character that is quintessentially Jewish that we have not thought of, that we have not stumbled upon? Yep.
Have you guys considered the people that Batman fights, put it better, like the opposite values that he's actually fighting up against, compare that to maybe things that come into contact or clashing with Judaism or Jewish ideas?
Well,
not Batman himself, but the other ideals he's fighting against.
My Zadie had the complexion of the Joker.
Well, look, I think one of the things that is a little hard to talk about is that some of Batman's villains fall into like the anti-Semitic caricature model.
There was a Saturday Night Live short, one of the Robert Smigel animated shorts that actually commented on that years ago. I don't know if anyone saw it, anyone else on the panel, but it was, I don't even remember, I have such vague, sketchy memories, so Robert Smigel, if you're watching this, please don't sue me, but it was Batman fighting, the idea is like how anti-Semites could make a Batman cartoon, and it's Batman fights Joker, and he's like, take that, Jew, and then he fights Penguin, take that, fat Jew, and the idea is, like, because Penguin's, like, rich, and he's got a top hat, and he's, very dressed like a banker or something, and then Joker, and they both got, like, big noses, especially the Penguin, and what?
And Joker's funny.
And Joker's funny. We don't know the Joker's real origin story, as he frequently tells us, it's always a lie, so maybe he is Jewish.
Sorry, Ari, the origin is very simple. He was a comedian in the Borscht Belt and somebody didn't tip him. And that was it.
Well, do you blame him then for going crazy? But it was a really sly commentary on the fact that like if you misappropriated this stuff, it could be turned into anti-Semitic propaganda. And I thought that was really interesting.
So the guy who asked the question, do you have a thought on that, opinion on that?
Oh, I have no opinions.
Okay.
Are you Jewish?
Short. I always thought that his response to...
You have to identify who you are.
Oh, I am John Ordover.
Yay.
Yay.
Writer John Ordover, ladies and gentlemen.
That Batman responds to immediate need with immediate action. And basically he's a hands person rather than a belief person. He sees Dick Grayson's family killed in front of him, and he immediately, in the original story, it seems like it was only about 5 minutes after they died that he was adopting him. Gorf basically, as you say, oh, yeah, why would you go into guy? Perhaps I'll take you back to my giant mansion. It's a whole other idea. One being that he responds with action to need, rather than prayer or hope or anything. He just takes it. He does God's work with his own hands. To me, is a very Jewish thing, and I'm probably right.
A number of years ago, I wrote a book. I published 6 books. One of them is a book for police officers. It's based on a course I created at the FBI Academy for police officers dealing with stress management, ethical decision making, etc. So the FBI recruited me many years ago to create this program. They wanted to identify what they call tools for intentional spirituality. And they've been through all kinds of clergy members, and they need to come up with something which was spiritual but not religious, because all that church-state separation stuff, they take it seriously, and people were all breaking the rules, so somehow they identified me. And I produced this course, and they've been using it now for the last, it's about 13, 14 years. They still use it at Quantico. I go down every once in a while and teach it. So I produced a book where I distilled those ideas that people who aren't going to be eligible to go to the National Academy can still have access to it. So I produced this book, and I sent it around. I want it, because I take it seriously also. I play by the rules. It's supposed to be spiritual and not religious. So I created this, it was in manuscript form, and I sent it out to my colleagues who are police chaplains, either that I know, police chaplains I know they were from my work, outreach work on Duke University, etc., other theologians, and I said to them, tell me about this book. Like, what do you think? Is it spiritual? Can you identify the author as being Jewish? I want it to be for everybody. So I got comments back. I said, yeah, this is great, this is great, this is great. One theologian, one Protestant theologian responded to me. She said to me, you don't get out of the starting gate. She said from the very first word, it was clear to me that a Jew wrote this. I had sent her the manuscript with no cover. The cover doesn't identify me as a rabbi. I said to her, what do you mean? So she said to me, you don't understand. We subscribe. She said, we Christians subscribe. She said, you're not going to realize this, but let's be purists about it for a moment. She said, we subscribe to the doctrine of faith righteousness. She said, what Christianity believes, and the way its jumping off point from Judaism, is that through your actions, you can do all those mitzvot. There's so many of them. You can do something and refine your character and elevate yourself and get to the next world based on your actions. It's not possible. It's based on a misunderstanding of a verse in Deuteronomy, in Devarim. It says, or someone who's not Yakim, Divrei Torah Zot. If someone is cursed, who doesn't keep the words of this Torah. So the early Christians, what they understood to me was, no one can keep this Torah. It's so darn hard. And it's hard, right? There's a lot of mitzvot. We spend a whole day doing stuff, but it's glorious. It's glorious. And we can do it. But they said, no, you can't. So they threw that out and replaced it with faith righteousness. She said to me, you guys believe, you Jews believe in the doctrine of acts righteousness. So she said, here you wrote this book, talking to the police officers, saying to them, the nobility of what you do, you refine your character, you elevate yourself through your actions, which are meaningful every single day. She said, that is all premised on the doctrine of acts righteousness. She says, right from the very beginning, the premise is it's all Jewish. So I said to her, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. That renders me unable to do anything. She said, it's okay. This was a conversation. She said to me, it's okay. She said, because, the truth is, she said, in Western civilization, she said, you guys won. So I was like, I wish someone had told me. It doesn't feel so great to be winning. So she said to me, because Western civilization, she said, in the mindset, she said, certainly in the West, even the Christian mind, she said, they understand it, and so much of Christian theology has been reworked that there's an orientation of action being significant as well. She said, so of course, she said, this woman speaking, this village, she said, in my work with the police officers, she said, I have no recourse, but, she said, I have no other option. I invoke that. She said, I just don't talk about it. She says, but de facto, we all believe in the doctrine of acts righteousness. She says, we just don't call it that. She says, but that's Jewish. So what you were saying before, like, it's like, is there something fundamentally Jewish about Batman? You have someone, we love Batman, the character, like the incredibly infinite greatness of this person. That's a Jewish concept. We don't look at him as like, essentially sinful or broken like that. Like we look like the greatness, the godless, the greatness of the human being, created B'Tselem Elohim, and his actions matter. That's Judaism. That's Torah.
I'm sorry, just one quick thing to add. You sure? Okay. Sorry, pass it on. I need to use the mic, despite my booming baritone. Building off what Cary just said, Judaism is a fascinating religion because it is not top-down. Maybe this is, Danny, answering your question of a new aspect of Batman, Jewish Batman, that we have not explored before. In most, if not all, other religions, the orders come from on high. There is a pope who creates doctrine and feeds it down the chain to the people, and the people follow it unquestioningly. Now, I'm not saying that's the way it really works. I'm just giving you a very exaggerated viewpoint to make a point. In Judaism, however, it's about the individual, as we've said, improving him or herself. This person has the power to study, to learn, to gather all of the knowledge, him or herself, and most importantly, to question the very fundamentals of everything that this person has been taught. That's Batman.
Which is sort of a byproduct. Wow, this is, I'm just, bear with me because I'm coming up with this thought, so maybe, but it's kind of the destruction of the temple. It's kind of the end of Jewish centrality. And it's like, you're on your own now.
Oh, that's brilliant, because you're right.
You too, Bruce Wayne, you're on your
Right,
own
when
now.
his parents were killed, that was the destruction of the temple. And he had to create a new way, a new altar, as it were, to take from the ashes and create a new life.
Yeah.
And with Jews, we were basing our entire religion on sacrifices in the temple, animal sacrifices in the temple, and then we had to create a Talmud, a Mishnah, a Talmud, a prayer service, the idea that we could have synagogues, that we don't have to have a temple, and that this religion could continue, because fundamentally it's about believing in one God and building off of that. And Bruce Wayne too, his temple was destroyed, his parents, and he had to figure out, okay, how do I continue believing in the one God, which is essentially, in his case, the self, and build that self up, so whatever, you get the idea.
Without one human intermediary who
Or the end of
interprets the
prophecy,
word.
Right.
at the end of prophecy where we have to take the law on ourselves.
Right, right. I'm sorry, I cut everybody off before, and I want to turn it back over to you guys.
Yes, question, somebody interrupt this.
Let's changing the subject a bit. We've been talking a lot about Batman, the person, and his interactions or subtle, under-the-table interactions in Judaism. But I'm really curious about what any of you have to say about the extended cast of Batman, his family, all these superheroes working in Gotham that have much more explicit connections to Judaism, like Kate Kane, created by Greg Rucka, who has always been vocal about the impact Judaism has had on his writing. And the Bombshells run right now, I don't know if people are following, but it's great, and it's this alternate
Miriam
universe.
Marvel.
What?
With Miriam Marvel.
Yeah, it's a Miriam Marvel. Yeah, it's great. It's basically mostly Gotham-based, but others too. Based superheroes who are now, so many of them suddenly Jewish in this alternate universe and taking place during World War II, and a lot of it in Germany. It's amazing.
Tell everyone what series that's running through.
Bombshell?
Yeah.
Yeah, DC Bombshell.
DC Bombshell, Marguerite Bennett. Yeah.
It's basically, okay.
Please.
It's basically a series which reimagines all of the DC comics as primarily female, and even the ones who are not female, but it basically focuses on the female characters. It's Mara, it's Mary Marvel, it's Batwoman, it's Batgirls, which were based off of League of Her Own, in fact, and it's set where it's starting in World War II and is slowly moving forward time-wise, and it's basically all the female heroines you ever heard of fighting the Nazis.
And suddenly most of them are Jewish.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Including like Zatanna.
Right, because God knows you can get a great deal on fishnets down in Flatbush.
Oh, there are a lot of Jewish magicians out there in real life.
That's true.
Zatanna does her magic by reading the words from what they had.
Somebody else. In the back.
That was a question.
No,
wasn't it?
oh,
I
no.
was wondering if you could, if any of you had things to say
Sorry,
about,
never mind. Okay.
about not just Batman himself, but the world he's living in, and all of, people like to think of him as this lone fighter, but he's got 5 different Robins in main continuity, and 3 different Batgirls in main continuity, all of these different characters, some of them have these Batwoman explicit connections to Judaism.
Right.
And
I actually addressed that head on. That's what No Man's Land to me was about. I always said that in my stories, you had to have the story arc, but you also had to have the emotional arc. Thank you. And the story arc is the plot. The emotional arc is what the character is experiencing. And I don't know if an emotional arc is really something that I coined or it exists out there, but nevertheless, that's the idea. And with No Man's Land, it was, okay, we're 10 years in continuity and real time past Batman Year One. In Batman Year One, Bruce Wayne is fighting the battle alone. he eventually amasses a Jewish family that's all hanging out in the Batcave and having Shabbos dinner together. And when No Man's Land hits, and the story of No Man's Land is that so much catastrophe has hit Gotham City that the US government says, forget it, like Sodom and Gomorrah, we're just going to cut it off from civilization and let it rot in hell. You'll forgive me for those who are under 10. And of course, a little aside, at the time, people were saying this is so fantastical, and then 3 years later, they were calling us prophets because of Katrina. But nevertheless. So in the beginning of No Man's Land, Bruce Wayne says to himself, you know what my mistake was? My mistake was letting people into my heart. I need to strip away all this family, and I need to do this myself. I need to be the lone avenger once again. And over the course of the story, he begins to amass the Batman, you'll forgive me, family again. Yeah. And the reason why is because it's a very central Jewish message, which is ultimately your family is your foundation. And that's a very Jewish concept, because many of the Jewish holidays, the core of them are with family. You think of the Passover Seder, for example. Just a little plug. I'm working on the Passover Haggadah graphic novel. So if you go to jewishcartoon.com/Haggadah, you'll see that project. It's a natural outgrowth of my work on Batman No Man's Land. Because it hit me that if Batman needs family, and if the Passover Seder revolves around the idea of family, then there must be a connection between the Passover Haggadah and comic books, and I need to bring the two of them together. So how's that?
Just out of curiosity, in destroying Wayne Manor and the Batcave simultaneously in the Earthquake, weren't you destroying Batman's temple?
Yes. Okay. Right on.
Just want to point out, if I can take 1 second. That notion of family, because that's not his family, it's a family he created. And that notion of creating a simulated family is also very Jewish. When I was growing up, every holiday meal, we had all the Grina, all the survivors, who were everybody was Tante this, and this was our Fetter, and these were our aunts and uncles. They had all been through the war, they had lost everything, and they had come together, they had cobbled together a family. And it was like, how else would somebody celebrate Rosh Hashanah or a Seder or something without going around the room and having every person describe the closest they came to being discovered and killed by the Nazis? I mean, that's what dinner conversation was like at our house. My father, you should rest in peace, used to sit, he would turn to his 2 American sons, he turned to us, he'd say, these people are like larger than life, like we would have been the first people killed. So that gave me a need, I have a decades-long need for therapy. There's that notion that we weak Americans would have been killed first. But I mean, that's what goes on in the Batcave. These are people who have all suffered trauma, and the family, they don't have that family. But to create that family anew, that's what they did, and that's what we do as Jews.
And by the way, how do you say Batman in Yiddish?
Batman?
Fledermaus. Yeah, Fledermenschen, yeah.
Going back to it. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, he was going to.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to add some things that I personally had on this theme that you're talking about, how you're talking about the Corbin, the temple, you're talking about the World War II elements, and there's this theme in Judaism of darkness preceding light. In the depths of Troy and Egypt, and coming out of the redemption. So I think it's fascinating that Bruce Wayne is perception like Cain and Finger coming out of World War II, and they've seen constructed the show, and then that leads to this whole renaissance of creativity and founding of Eretz Israel again, and return to Eretz Israel, etc. And I had.
While you're thinking of that, that's dynamite, because Superman and Batman are yin and yang, and they always have been. It goes that. I intended that. It's said, so I don't remember it, Dan, you can probably correct me, or you can correct me. It's something like above 34th Street is Metropolis, and below 34th Street is Gotham City.
14th Street.
14th, thank you. Yeah, but it's been gentrified, so yeah. So what you're saying is brilliant, because we spoke before about Superman as the immigrant experience, right? They didn't go through the darkness, they came to the light. Whereas Batman is the experience of having gone through the war and suffered to experience that darkness, in order to try to still find the light. And I think that's very profound.
Okay, so now I'm going to take that a step further.
Oh.
We'll just keep
Gavaldic.
doing this on top of each
I
other.
have two quick things I want to finish off.
Oh, go finish
You
it.
say the blessing every morning before the Shema, so the Shem, Yotze Or Rebbe Kosher, that he had created darkness first, and then out of that he formed light that came out of darkness. So it's a major theme of Kabbalah and Chassidus, one that we have that principle. There's always darkness that gives way to light. So I noticed that when there was the Dark Knight Rises movie massacre that happened in the theater, what was it?
Yeah.
4 years ago. Yeah. It was a midnight showing. It was a dark night. It was this terrible, horrible tragedy. It was the epitome of darkness. But it took place in a city called Aurora, which means light. And Or, in Lashon Kodesh, means light. There was something to that that was very profound. It also took place in Rosh Chodesh Av, which is like the start of the 9 days, and the darkest, tragic days of Jewish history.
It also looks like a very good movie.
Do me a favor. You visit me at my table. I want to talk to you further.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll just say one other thing on darkness and light thing. So several years back, I wrote a story about Batman when he's first starting out, and because thanks to retroactive continuity, Gotham City was before Batman the home of the original Green Lantern, and who had since long retired and whatever. And so I did this story about Batman starting out and his first encounter with another costume hero, because Green Lantern comes, and Green Lantern is a guy who's, the original Green Lantern, whose oath was that I'm going to shine my light over dark things because dark evil can't stand the Green Lantern. And so he was not real happy about this dark vigilante coming into his town. And so, and that also, and of course they make friends.
Both co-created by Bill Finch.
Both co-created by Bill Finch, right. But, and so that also is I think an essential part of Batman, because one of the things that I brought out in their, snapping at each other was Batman says to Green Lantern, fine, so you had your light and you're off fighting supervillains and aliens, but who's watching the back alleys, which is of course where his parents died. And so Batman needed to go into the darkness in order to root out all of that stuff in the darkness that, otherwise would just kind of retreat into the shadows when all the light is there. So, which is, again, yin and yang to
Can we just get his question quickly, because he's been waiting so nicely?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. Just one thing. We were talking about possible alleged anti-Semitism in some of the characters, the villains. Remember when Batman Returns came out, there was a very controversial op-ed in the New York Times that basically alleged that the film was very anti-Semitic because not only were the Penguin and Shrek kind of like Nazi-era stereotypes of Jews, but also there were Exodus motifs all across the movie. The Penguin's put in a basket when he's a baby, like Moses, then comes after their firstborn at the end, I think. So, and there's a lot of Wagner music, thematically throughout the film. So that's just something interesting. I know the filmmakers defended it. But also, just in terms on a more positive note, Batman and Jewish values, there's a quote from the Talmud in Pirkei Avos that says, basically, and the rabbi can translate it exactly, but it's in a place where there is no man. I mean man in a sort of good person, in a place where there is no man, try to be a man, and I feel like that relates to Batman, not only literally in no man's land, it's very literal, but also in general in Gotham City. I feel like Gotham City is this pretty terrible place, and he's the one person who's stepping up, and kind of following that dictum from the Talmud.
Well, right, and that's very much the Pirkei Avot line, right? That in a place where there are no men, be a man.
Which is tough for a guy whose development is arrested at age 8.
Right. Or be a bat, as the case may be.
But I would like to say that I don't think, I don't know what everyone else thinks about this, but I don't think personally that the Joker or the Penguin are anti-Semitic. I just meant that they could be used, misappropriated by.
Right. However, the calculator would definitely anti-Semitic. Sorry.
One last question.
I just wanted to ask if you guys can sing the Batman theme song.
Da, 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 da.
Elliot Brown, if anybody remembers the Handbook of the Marvel Universe. Elliot Brown dressed up in a tuxedo and proceeded to, as a poet laureate of some kind, he came out with a sheet of papers and ruffled them, and he proceeded to recite, Batman. 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 Do-do. 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 So that was, I think that was probably my favorite interpretation of that song.
Can we all do it, but instead of singing Batman, sing Fleeter Mouse? It's never been done before. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Na 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 na. Fleeter Mouse. Well done.
Guys, thank you so very, very much. A big hand to the Batman experts here. And thank you right now. Don't go anywhere unless you're going up to the Artist Alley to buy something, because what we really have is a phenomenal event called Indie Voices Past, Present, and Future. With one slight change, Ariel Schrag is not here. But the rest of the crew is ready to talk to you all about the whole indie comics thing. Did I point out Shoshana Brombacher's art? Local artist here in Brooklyn, was part of one of our past performances here. Her art is available, and if anyone is interested, please see me. There is a silent auction in the back of some of their work. It's right there. Help our shul, please, meet its goals. In about 3 minutes, 4 minutes, Indie Voices.
How do you do, Fred? That's me to stay well. Well, either you're going to need to build the place out a little bit. This is at least the Batman panel. That's right. Do some art.
My friend, Cary did something joking about, like, all the Jewish ComicCon, you can take these stuff guys in their 80s and 90s, they all like, right, you always come back. Right. It's time for me to recover my dead phone.
I'm sure your phone is pretty close to...
Oh.
So a quick, simple Batman question for you.
It was on.
You know, it didn't die, it just said...
Oh, so it was on the whole time.
It was on the whole time.
Oh, that's so great. We're so happy. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Yeah.